Hello and welcome to FTT Chats, where we sit down with some of the great and the good of FinTech for a bit of a chat. I'm Liz Lumley, and today I'm sitting down to speak to Niels Robert Pearson. Hello, how are you?
Hi, Liz. I'm fine. And how are you?
I'm very good. Yeah, it's a lovely crisp autumn day here in London, so it's one of my favorite types of weather. So I'm really kind of happy.
Me too. I prefer autumn before all other seasons. So it can be some nice days.
Yes,
and nice colors.
Very, very true. I'm originally from New England, so I'm very big on the colors of the trees. So it reminds me of my childhood. So why don't we start in on some of the questions that I have for you today? So you've had a very long career in the financial services industry, mostly working with exchanges and clearing systems. And this used to be called, especially when I started out in the industry, financial technology. The technology and data used by financial firms, banks, exchanges to do their business. Do you consider what you do FinTech?
I really do, yeah. So I started early in the 80s in one of the largest investment bank in Scandinavia, SEB. And the reason for that was that they decided to, their board decided to invest more than I think any other bank in the world at the time in IT. And the reason was not that the board had been studying on MIT or Harvard. The reason was much simpler than so. It was the fact that in Sweden in early 80s was the country with the highest salary and taxes in the world. So the cost was enormously. And banking started to be international at that time. So to be able to compete, they had to do something. And the board decision was to firstly replace all manual routines with computerized routines, and then also define and develop new services based on IT. So that was a fantastic time, and I have been using FinTech, or the fact that I think I started this career a little bit or a long time before you, because at that time we were not discussing financial technology, it was banking technology. And which became to be a financial technology later. And so I have been using the word FinTech for a long time. Unfortunately, the bank, SEB, still are running some of the systems I was responsible for implementing earlier 80s. So they are almost 40 years old, and that's a shame, of course. They still are recruiting developer who are developing system or supporting system in COBOL. So that is not FinTech. That is definitely not FinTech. But otherwise, I think that was also a very good place to be in to start with a career, because of the fact that everything we did was for starting from scratch.
Yeah, I almost want to continue talking about these legacy systems. I don't think SEB is unique in running on systems that are 40 years old and COBOL. It's a story that's told over and over again in banks all over the world. It is an interesting environment that banks put themselves in. But I kind of wanted to go back in time. I wanted to stay in the 80s with you, because you're going to speak at our Nordic event, which is coming up on October 14th, which we've kind of cheekily called the class of 1984. And it's really sort of looking back at sort of the history of innovation and particularly the launch of the OM exchange in 1984, which you played a part in. At the time when that exchange was being developed and launched, did the players involved see themselves as being entrepreneurial and innovative? Did they look at it in that way?
First, I had to correct you. I was not involved in OM from day one. I became to be employee 4 years later, but I was following them very closely from day one. So on your question, if they were entrepreneurial, I would say that there was a small group, very small group, that definitely were. They were directly involved in the establishment of them. They were real entrepreneurs, but the huge majority in the market was definitely not. They were trying to do their very best to oppose the project. That was of course a very tough period for the entrepreneurs to establish something nobody had heard about and nobody had done before. Olof Stenhammar, the founder of OM, he had at the period in the 80s nothing to do and would like to do something on his own. And the only thing he could think about was to start an derivatives marketplace or something with derivatives. And the reason for that was that when he was younger, he was working on the floor in one of the exchanges in Chicago. So he would like to do something similar. And he collected a small team of very good people, and they had an idea. That idea they had to change a lot, because the banks was against, because they would like to protect their OTC market. The finance supervisor was definitely against, because this was something that was extremely dangerous. The Stockholms fondbörs, the equity exchange in Sweden, they had a legal monopoly, so they were definitely against. And VPC, the share register, part of Euroclear, they requested to be the clearer, because everything with securities should be organized by them. And the media was also against. A large part of the media was against to start with. They changed their mind after a while, but to start with, they were definitely against. So I would say the sponsors was young people coming from university, have been studying finance. They loved maths. They loved the finance and the combination between maths and finance. So they were the real sponsors. And they started small private-owned market makers. A lot of them did a huge success, but they were the sponsors, and I think they were also part of the reason why it went so well. But as I said earlier, that they had to change a lot. They had to change a lot because OM became to be something extremely different from everything else in this world. So it was private-owned for a profit company. It was integrated exchanges and the clearinghouse. It was digital matching, no floor, which were something the large exchanges couldn't understand. It was they were offering clearing for OTC market. So of course you can trade on the OTC market, but we can transform the risk for you. That was the message. They were system provider. They sold the system already after a couple of years. They started selling the system. The first customer was the option market in Austria, the ÖTOB, and there was a couple of other things also. And I think the most strange thing was the fact that end customer could have an account in the clearinghouse. That was something nobody heard about. The Dutch market and the Swedish market became to be the two markets where end customer were a very important part of the derivative market.
Yeah, but I'm interested to know a bit more detail about the objections. You know, you mentioned that some people thought it was dangerous, and you kind of paint a picture of young people coming up from university with new ideas about finance. I mean, what were some of the objections that people had? What was it? Just they were threatened by this new way of doing business?
Absolutely, no doubt, they were definitely threatened by by establishing a private-owned derivatives exchange, no doubt. But there was also international. There was a lot of objections as well. The major from start was, of course, that floor trading was much more fast, much more reliable than computer trading. So when we asked about the small notes the floor trader did and threw on the floor, we said that can't be secure. But they always told us that floor trading was much more secured. Derivatives in general was, of course, dangerous, extremely dangerous. So if you could trade them in the dark market, it would be much better than have it on an exchange. Clearing and settlement should be organized by banks or by banks-owned organization. It should not be done by a private company. And of course, exchanges should never be running for profit. That was something that should never happen. I remember one time in one of the IOMA conferences in Chicago in late 80s, Olof Stenhammar was asked about his possibility to organize and start an exchange in US, and he said, "No, I think it's really easier." And you have to remember when it was end 80s. I think it's easier to establish an exchange in Russia than in US. It was not especially popular after that for a while, but that was the feeling that OM came with something that was so strange that it should never have happened. And to offer a clearing for OTC market, that was something. A risk manager for one of the largest clearing houses in the world told me at a panel discussion on a huge conference at that time. That is something that is similar to go to bed with your enemies. So that should never happen as well. So that was the kind of objection they had in the market.
I'm interested to know sort of the legacy of the launch of that system. You know, I know in the US, you know, people talk about the PayPal mafia and like people that have gone off and done other things. What is the legacy of the OM system in Sweden and Scandinavia in terms of just innovation and businesses, and if at all?
Because of the fact that OM started with on a technology platform from day one. And the only way of starting business in this area was to develop technologies. Sweden became to be a leading country in developing such applications. So OM started already, as I said earlier, to sell systems in 80s and early 90s to exchanges and clearinghouses. And 10 years later, Cinnober was established, selling a system also to exchange and clearing houses. Cinnober was acquired by Nasdaq 2019. OM was acquired 2006. So Nasdaq have taken a huge part of this. No doubt that OM technology is the base of Nasdaq Tech today. And now also Vermiculus Financial Technology have started working with exchanges and clearinghouses here in Stockholm. But that was not the only picture. I think we have to mention also all other companies that was established because OM was created. So there was market making systems, trading systems, market surveillance systems, and such systems in general that was developed by Swedish companies like Trioptima, Itiviti, or Orc or Rat, which were the old names, Front, Skila, and a lot of other companies that had been developing and had got large market shares in the global market, and the outcome originally came from OM in one or other way.
Excellent. Yeah. No, I mean we could talk for a while about this, but I'm gonna bring in my final question now, And so it's so what are you doing now? What keeps you busy?
That's an interesting question. When Nasdaq bought Sonova, my idea was to support startups, and I was happy to support startups in the FinTech area, and I did. But after a while, so I have invested in more than 10 different companies, and I'm following, supporting them, and I'm working with them sometimes. But half a year ago, a couple of old colleagues and old customer came and asked if we couldn't start something again. So earlier this year we started Vermiculus Financial Technology, and I'm now working with Vermiculus a lot, and I enjoy it very much. We have recruited 30 people now, and that's some of the best developer and system people I have been working with in my career, and that says a lot because I've been working in this industry for almost 4 years. So to be able to work together with such a team is very nice.
Excellent. Niels, Robert, thank you so much for sitting down and having a chat with me today. And we'll see you again on October 14th. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.